Welcome to Wize to the Wordz. In this video, we are going to go over the origin stories of at least 10 common idioms that we use in everyday speech. Most of them you've probably used yourself. At the end of the video, how many have you used? How many did you know the origin story of? First of all, what is an idiom? It sounds like idiot. Is it just a common saying, a common phrase, a proverb? Just slang? Not exactly. An idiom is indeed a phrase or expression that conveys a particular message, but which cannot be understood by just looking and understanding the individual words of that phrase. You cannot take the idiom itself at face value. You cannot take the words literally. The whole means something different than the parts. Idioms are common in every language and culture, and they convey a particular meaning or message that becomes familiar to a native speaker. For example, when you tell someone break a leg, you don't mean literally break an appendage. You mean to wish them luck. Maybe the luck to join a cast of a play or a show.
No, it is broken right here.
Just a hairline fracture, though.
No, it's a clean break.
Slight, though.
Slight? No, it's broken.
Broken, or just broken?
Or when you tell someone to bite the bullet, you're not telling them to literally bite ammunition, but to endure a painful or difficult situation with courage. Incidentally, the idiom bite the bullet goes back to the 19th century battlefield surgery, which was a world without anesthetics, or largely without anesthetics. It was common practice for patients without anesthetics to bite on a piece of wood or to bite a bullet to help them endure the pain. If you could just bite down on that subscribe button, thank you. Here are at least 10 more idioms and their histories. We've all heard of the term smart Aleck. In fact, most of us have been told at one point or another in our life, don't be a smart Aleck. Sometimes it's spelled Aleck or Alec. One who is called a smart Aleck is someone who is too smart for their own good. Someone who is too witty, too sarcastic, too humorous, to a fault. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a smart Aleck is a person who is irritating because he behaves as if he knows everything. In other words, over cocky and self-assured. The term dates back all the way to the 1840s. Actually, it turns out that Aleck was a real person. His name was Alexander Hogue, born in New York around 1809. By his mid-20s, Alexander was an established criminal, a scam artist, a con artist. Yet it was his criminal escapades in the 1840s that made his name famous. You see, Alexander started a prostitution ring. He was the lead pimp, and his leading prostitute was his very own wife, Melinda. However, they had a very special hustle. Melinda would seduce men, and while they were preoccupied and distracted, she would rob them. Eventually, this criminal couple had to modify their scheme because word of their thefts began to circulate. This is when Alexander decided to hire security.
Hello, this is the Slippy Slappy Security Company. How can we help your complete incompetence?
Hi, I'm very insecure. The security that Alexander got just happened to be two corrupt police officers, with whom Alexander promised he would split the profit of the stolen goods. In the new scheme, Melinda would lead the victims not down an alley, but into a secure hotel room, which was guarded outside of the hotel by these corrupt cops. While the Johns were being distracted by Melinda, Alexander would sneak in and rob the victims blind. This scheme worked for a long time until Alexander got a little bit too cocky and began to lie to his corrupt security guards about the amount of the profit he was acquiring. He would even hide some of the booty in secret locations. Eventually, in the 1950s, the corrupt cops found out that they were being cheated, so naturally, no more protection for that smart Aleck. He was thrown in jail. It wasn't long after his imprisonment that the term smart Aleck entered the American lexicon. Alexander was too smart for his own good, and his cockiness led to his downfall and arrest. Don't be a smart Aleck. To spill the beans means to disclose a secret, usually accidentally or imprudently. Maybe you slipped up and said something you weren't supposed to, or talked too much and revealed the secret by implication. In any case, you spilled the beans. One theory about the origin of this idiom dates back to ancient Greece and how they voted anonymously. It is said that the Greeks, especially when bringing new members into a secret society, would use beans to count the votes. White beans meant a positive vote in favor of the person, and black or dark beans meant a negative one against the person. These were the ballots, and they were cast in secret. If someone knocked over the container of beans before everyone voted, intentionally or not, they would spill the beans and reveal the results early. The problem with this popular theory is that this idiom is really an example of American slang, which only began to be seen about 1919, though the ancient ballot source probably was not the source. However, it is true that balls or beans were used as ballots in the ancient voting system. In fact, that is where we get the term blackballed. It's when someone gets voted against with the ballot box full of black beans or black balls. We use the term blackballed as though they were blacklisted. Basically, we don't know beans about the precise origin of the phrase to spill the beans. And this is true of many of the histories and etymologies of words. We don't know precisely, but there are interesting possibilities and theories. Wait, where does that saying fork it over come from? Well, the word fork goes back to the Roman, that is Latin word, furca, which was a farming tool with two metal tines, much like our modern-day pitchfork. The Old English transformed furca into fork. The two metal tines on the tool actually look like fingers. In fact, the human hand actually looks like a fork. In fact, it was the original fork. And our modern-day culinary tool, the fork, looks like a bunch of metal fingers. To fork it over was to use your hand and immediately hand something over. This was often used in the middle of a robbery. So forks was a slang for hands, and so was dukes, as in the idiom, put up your dukes, or duke it out.
Mr. Lin in room 310 wants to see you after you check in.
Who the hell's Mr. Lin?
I'm Lin. You Jackson? You look like a Jackson. That would make you Frank Dux.
No. It's Dukes.
Gotcha. Like put up your dukes, right?
A duke is a leader from the Latin dux, and the leader here was the Duke of York. So the rhyming street slang at the time, put up your Duke of Yorks, put up your Duke of Forks, and forks meant hand, and then eventually dukes just became hand. The Duke of York here was Prince Frederick, who was the son of the English king George III, the king from which the Americans fought for their independence. Frederick, the Duke of York, was not only a fan of boxing, he was an avid boxer himself, much to the shock and scandal of English high society. Bare-knuckle boxing was considered a low-class pastime, not appropriate for royalty. However, the Duke won a great deal of admiration from his fellow boxers, that his fists were called the Dukes of York, then shortened to just dukes. Thus, beginning in the 1800s, the sayings duking it out or put your dukes up spread wide. As regards boxing, the Duke of York was the Real McCoy. The Real McCoy means something genuine, authentic, of high quality. Not too many people realize, but that the roots of this idiom is also probably from boxing. However, the Real McCoy origin of the Real McCoy is not entirely known for certain. There is more than one theory. One theory is that it was derived from the Scottish saying, the Real McCay, which was recorded for the first time in 1856. It too meant something was authentic. The phrase was used by whiskey distillers in Edinburgh called Messrs. G. McKay and Company to distinguish their whiskey from competitors. Their whiskey was the Real McCay. Eventually, it's found its way into America and became the Real McCoy. However, there is another origin story that is very interesting. Some believe the Real McCoy was actually a man named Norman Selby, who was a welterweight boxing champion in the early 1900s and fought under the name Charles Kid McCoy. Kid was a common moniker for gang members and boxers. Kid McCoy ended his career with a record of 99-6. There seems to be evidence that some of those losses may have been deliberately thrown by him in order to get certain champion opponents more likely to take fights against him. People began to doubt his authenticity. He also gave many lackluster performances that the crowd began to wonder if they were going to see the Real McCoy in this fight or not. After a particularly exciting win, one paper used the headline, "Now you've seen the Real McCoy." To run amok. The news is certainly filled with story after story of people running amok.
Wet costumes and run amok. Oh, just one.
We've all probably heard this phrase, but not many of us would know where it came from. It means to rush around in a murderous frenzy, to be in a wild, chaotic, violent rage, or words to that effect. Sometimes it's spelled amok, amuck, or amuko. But where did it come from? The term originated in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia or Java. In the Malay culture of the 16th century, that is the 1500s, there was a class of warriors who would go into a rage of violence, the state of amok. It was believed that they were possessed by an evil spirit called hantu bilia. Through this state, they believed that they would either acquire glory or death. If they were to die in that state, their death would bring them favor from their gods. In a 1516 book entitled The Book of Duarte Barbosa, an account of the countries bordering on the Indian Ocean and their inhabitants talks about this phenomena. There are some of them, the Javanese, who go out into the streets and kill as many persons as they meet. These are called amuko. And in 1772, Captain James Cook describes a similar experience during his travels in Southeast Asia. To run amok is to get drunk with opium, to sally forth from the house, kill the person or persons supposed to have injured the amok, and any other person that attempts to impede his passage. Unquote. Now, to run amok is very similar to another popular idiom, namely, to go berserk. In fact, they basically mean the same thing. Whereas to run amok comes from East Asia, to go berserk originated from the Norse, the Vikings. The Vikings were fierce warriors, but some of them fought with a special trance-like ferocity. Berserk means bare shirt, serk meaning shirt in Old Norse. One historian interpreted berserk to mean bare shirt, that is, no shirt, so that the berserkers went into battle with zero armor. But this interpretation has largely been abandoned. It seems to be pretty settled that berserkers went into battle wearing bearskins and pure rage. However, the saying to go berserk really began to be used in the early 1900s.
Sean's about to go berserk.
Hopefully, when berserkers went into battle, they were armed to the teeth. This saying had nothing to do with the Vikings, but it does mean to be completely ready for battle. Some believed it was a pirate saying. Imagine a pirate, hands filled with other weapons. The only other place to hold a weapon is his teeth. Or imagine a pirate swinging from one ship to the next. He had to put his sword or his blade in his teeth, armed to the teeth. Cool as that explanation is, it's probably mostly Hollywood. To the teeth was actually a common saying in the Middle Ages. It meant completely from head to toe, full of whatever was being referred to. Just like we say, I'm drowning in debt up to my eyeballs, or I've had it up to here, armed to the teeth, full of weapons, ready for battle. Battle axe. Now, a great weapon to be armed to the teeth with is a battle axe, although it isn't fun being married to one. Battle axe is an idiom referring to an overbearing or quarrelsome older woman. Interestingly, it did not begin as a derogatory term. In fact, it originated from the early women's rights movement in America. They had a journal that they published called the Battle Axe. They were ready for battle. In the early 1900s, there was a militant activist in the temperance movement named Carrie Nation. She actually would carry a hatchet around and published a magazine called The Hatchet. Eventually, battle axe became a derogatory term and an early ancestor of the Karen pejorative, abnormally entitled and demanding woman. Before Karen caught on, there were similar terms like barbecue Becky, cornerstone Caroline, or permit Patty. When a battle axe starts asking too many questions, be afraid. Be very afraid. You might lose an arm and a leg. The idiom, an arm and a leg, is used to describe something that is very expensive or costly. No one knows the exact origin of this phrase, but it seems to have originated during World War II, where soldiers who lost limbs in the war were said to have given an arm and a leg for their country. These amputations were at an extreme cost to themselves. Just like many have said similar idioms like, I would give my right arm to have that. Another theory, not generally accepted as the legitimate origin, but definitely more interesting, is that an arm and a leg idiom originated from the practice of early portrait painters. Portraits were cheaper if they were just of the subject's head and shoulders, the bust. The more of the body was shown, the more expensive the painting was. Waist up showing the arms, or a full body portrait.
Will it cost you an arm and a leg to like, comment, share, subscribe?
Oh, and please watch this video. Now you're wise to the words. Cut! Cut! Man, how many of these videos I gotta make? We're still on? Still recording? Now you're wise to the words.